And good morning. My name is Andrew Hone, President and CEO of the Portland Business Alliance, which is Greater Portland's Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today for our September forum. And we wish we were in person, which I think at the beginning of the summer, we all intended to return to in-person gatherings. But as all of you know, we are making sure to continue to work together to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus and to do our best to keep everyone safe. We hope that all of you are staying safe and well and continuing to handle the challenges and changes that are happening throughout this pandemic. So we make sure that all of you are continuing to get vaccinated, encourage all of you to continue the important work of physical distancing. With ongoing COVID-19 updates and new regulations, our team will continue to work diligently in serving as a resource to you, our community, and get the information as it comes to us. Our website is updated frequently. Look, there it is. That's how up to date it is. It appears on your screen. Make sure to follow us on social media for updates. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and elsewhere. If it doesn't happen on social media, it doesn't happen. So a recording of this presentation and links for resources mentioned will be available on our website later today. Of course, none of these events could happen without the support of our incredible members, and we have some great sponsors, and I'd like to thank them today. Thank you to our Forum Series sponsor, KeyBank, and the Portland Tribune. Joining us today from KeyBank, you'll see him as Ted, but I'll affectionately call him as Theo because my son's name is Theodore, and we call him Theo. So Ted Fettig, please welcome, and thank you again for all the support from KeyBank, and the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, Andrew, and good morning, everyone. As Andrew mentioned, I'm Ted Fettig, Market Manager and Senior Vice President for Key Private Bank, supporting the Oregon and Alaska regions. I want to thank you for joining us today in what is sure to be a very insightful program. You know, if you were to ask local businesses what their most challenging issue is, it would likely be something related to staffing. Maybe they're having trouble finding the right talent, or maybe their current teams have differing opinions on in-person versus remote work. And this can be taxing because we know it's challenging to serve customers adequately without a strong bench of performers who share your passion. At KeyBank, our top priority is to ensure we're creating a workplace that allows us to attract and retain the best talent so that we can meet our customers' needs. That's why we have a strong focus on diversity, inclusion, along with a commitment to supporting our team's wellness needs. And that includes areas of physical, mental wellness, and of course, financial wellness. We know that employee experience is tied closely to the client experience, and we value both. As we look ahead to the fourth quarter and 2022 just around the corner, this is an ideal time to review upcoming talent needs and set in motion a strategy to fill them. I know I look forward to hearing the data and trends that our panel will be sharing, along with some practical advice we can all use. Our thanks to the Portland Business Alliance for putting together this panel. I know we're all going to learn a lot today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. And of course, welcome to the board as well and for your service. We appreciate it. So thank you, KeyBank. And now I would like to thank the Portland Tribune, and joining us today from the Trib is John Schrag in place of Mark Garber, who we send our appreciation to and hope he's well. And now you, John, welcome to the Forum Series, and thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks. Boy, what Ted said sure sounded familiar. Mark and I can both speak from experience on this topic, since over the past 3 months, we've hired 6 journalists for the Pamplin Media Group, and I've often felt like I've been competing with not only people from the region, but newsrooms across the country. So I'm very eager to hear what the experts say on this. However, staffing in my industry is still largely an exercise in subtraction. The Pew Research estimates that since 2008, newspapers have cut more than 70,000 jobs. That's nearly 60% of our news staff. Digital newsrooms have picked up some of the slack, but have only added back an estimated 1 in 7 of those positions. When I think back, when I covered the legislature in 1993 for Willamette Week, there were at least 3 dozen reporters in the State House on any given day. Now, you're lucky if you get above single digits. When I became the editor of the News Times in Forest Grove in 2005, there were 3 newsrooms that regularly covered the rural communities outside of that western suburb. Now, too often, there are none. This is not good for our industry, it's not good for our democracy, and it's certainly not good for our economy. But there are some hopeful signs, and I want to share just a couple of them with you now. Legislation pending in Congress, which has bipartisan support, would give payroll tax credits to newspapers, allowing us to restore some of those positions we all cut during the pandemic. In Oregon, there are plans for a new nonprofit State House newsroom in Salem and another initiative to help our rural journalists in the state. And I'm part of a group exploring the feasibility of a nonprofit newsroom that would help all news outlets throughout the state in a variety of ways. That effort received more than $30,000 in private donations and a $25,000 match from the Oregon Community Foundation. And we had tremendous support from the business community, including the Portland Business Alliance, which made a contribution of $1,000. Thank you, Andrew. And even larger checks from several PBA members. Now, Andrew suggested that I use this time to ask you all to challenge and match that $1,000, but instead of money, I have a different request for you. I want your time and expertise. So next spring, along with the state of the state of the county, the state of the city, I want the Portland Business Alliance to invite me and your wonderful board president, John Maher, back here for a PBA-sponsored State of the Media Forum. The people in business are the perfect ones to host such a conversation because you understand our problem. It's not a lack of news or a lack of reporters. It's not a lack of community commitment to the craft. It is the collapse of the business model. And come spring, I'd love to be part of a conversation that results in some creative responses to a big but not insurmountable problem and find ways to employ more people in my profession. Back to you, Andrew.
And thank you so much for that call out, John. And for those of you on this forum today, it is critical to support local journalism and local media. And the challenges that we've all faced as industries across the spectrum are acute within our media colleagues, and democracy truly thrives in light. So we appreciate the work of our journalists and our media who cover the critical issues to all of us, and making sure we have a healthy state of the media is a priority for all of us who do the work that we do. So thank you so much. And thank you to the Tribune. And now with that, from one media group to another, I am very happy to welcome the chair of the Portland Business Alliance and president of the Oregonian Media Group, John Maher. John, welcome.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, John Schrag, for all you're doing in that space. I really appreciate the work you're doing there. And welcome everybody to our September forum, which is focused on Portland's tight labor markets and the data, trends, and tips for local employers. As we were prepping for this session today, Ben Forstag mentioned that the latest Alliance survey shows that this is a top concern for all of our members in the recent survey data. And I know that we're feeling it, everybody's feeling it. It's a challenge out there. So we know you're going to have questions. Please share those questions with us by using the Q&A tool at the bottom of your Zoom window. The only questions we'll be able to review will be coming to us from that tool. As you can imagine, there's a lot going on in these sessions. So please use the tool for questions. Include your full name and your organization, as well as the location of your business when you submit that question. And if you have a comment, please share it using the chat function. I'd like to welcome today's moderator, Orlando Williams, who's the Chief Executive and Equity Officer with Motus Recruiting and Staffing. And welcome, Orlando. Take it away.
Well, thank you so much, John, and thank you to the Portland Business Alliance for having such a meaningful conversation and inviting me to be your moderator. I am honored. Welcome all of you into today's discussion. We're looking forward to engaging with you on this incredibly important topic that I am personally excited about as the Chief Executive and Equity Officer of Motus Recruiting. It's something that is near and dear to my heart. With that said, I would love to introduce the remaining panelists for our conversation today. So we'll start by introducing Gail Krumenauer. Gail is the state employment economist with the state of Oregon. We also have with us today Andrew McCough, executive director with Work Systems, and also Kevin Perkey, executive director with Workforce, Southwest Washington. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you all in. And how about we start with some introductions? We'll allow each of you to introduce yourselves. And how about we start with you, Kevin?
Hey, thanks, Orlando. Kevin Perkey, CEO for Workforce Southwest Washington. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you, Kevin. And Bridget. I think you're on mute, Bridget.
My apologies. Thank you for having me join this discussion today. I'm Bridget Daisy, Executive Director of Clackamas Workforce Partnership.
Thank you so much, Bridget. And Andrew.
Morning, everyone. Andrew McGough, Executive Director of Work Systems. We're the workforce board that serves the city of Portland, Multnomah, and Washington counties. And I just wanted to say, I think the last time I was here, someone gave me a pin that said jobs on it because we had such a dearth of jobs at the time. So it's an interesting circle that we're all experiencing.
Oh, that's for sure, Andrew, for sure. Hopefully you kept that pin. And last but not least, of course, Gail.
Good morning. Thanks everyone for asking me to join you today. Gail Kremenauer, I'm the State Employment Economist in the Workforce and Economic Research Division of the Oregon Employment Department.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here. So let's dive into some questions. Our audience is curious to hear what you have to say. And Gail, let's start with you. Let's level set a little bit. And with this event and Portland's tight labor market, can you give an overview of the state's kind of big picture and national picture of the state of labor and the entire market?
Yes, thanks for giving me a couple of minutes to kind of set the stage for the broader context of the conversation today. I appreciate it. So each business cycle is unique, and the pandemic recession and jobs recovery is certainly unlike anything any of us have seen before. Just as a quick comparison, for historical reference, during the last recession, the Great Recession, at 18 months past the initial downturn, we were still losing jobs. We lost jobs every month for about 2 years. So at this point in that recession, we hadn't regained any jobs on net at all. There's no recovery today. Now, 18 months past the initial downturn in the pandemic recession, Oregon has regained nearly 3/4 or 72% of the jobs that were lost in the spring of 2020. And that's really similar to the US, which has regained 76% of the jobs that were lost in the spring. And for the Portland metropolitan area specifically, the 7-county region, it's about 63% of those jobs have been regained. Oregon employers, just in the last 8 months, the first 8 months of this year, have added more than 80,000 jobs. Prior to this, the most jobs that Oregon employers ever added in a full calendar year was 61,000. And I know we'll talk about the leisure and hospitality sector today. Oregon's restaurants, bars, hotels, and entertainment places have added more than 29,000 jobs back this year. That's in 8 months. So prior to the pandemic, adding 29,000 jobs took 5 full years, 61 months for that sector. So things are moving incredibly fast. And to be sure, that comes with pains, the pains of fast and intense competition to get workers, and to do so during an ongoing pandemic. COVID cases in Oregon have recently been at their all-time highs. And we know that as of spring, between April and June, there were still about 32,500 Oregonians who said that they were prevented from looking for work due to COVID concerns. Now, some of those have eased up. Some of those concerns were related to not having childcare, which is still reduced in many places, or to the fact that schools were remote, fully or partially remote, for more than a year. Now, this marks, at least in my household, this marks the 1-week anniversary of being back in person in school. So some of these things have broken loose a little bit, and we're seeing that. We're seeing these big gains as in public K-12 and higher education, as we're seeing those kids going back to school and in-person instruction happening again. Others aren't. With the ongoing COVID cases, there are still people with underlying health concerns. And I know we'll talk about remote work today too, but that's not really the rule. Remote work is kind of the exception. At the peak of the pandemic shutdowns in May 2020, 1 out of 3 jobs was able to be worked remotely at least part of the time, which means 2/3 of them weren't. And now, this is a US trend. I don't have Oregon specific data on this by the month, but now it's all the way back down to about 15%. So most people, when they're thinking about their households, their situations. We're hiring for full-time in-person jobs that largely can't be remotely worked. And so those factors are still at play for a lot of the workforce. Just a quick hit on pandemic federal unemployment benefit programs. They ended nearly 2 weeks ago. I know there's also a lot of sentiment that unemployment benefits have been the lone sole thing keeping people from working, yet hiring's happening at an unprecedented pace while those benefits were in place. To be sure, we're going to loosen up some of those things now that they're gone and schools are back in session. But let's take a look just for reference at the 26 states who ended those benefits early. In June and July, there were 26 states that ended pandemic-related benefits early. As of early August, only 1 out of 8 workers who lost those benefits was back on the job. And I think that just reinforces that, yes, unemployment insurance benefits are a factor, and so are other things that are happening amid a pandemic. And I say, I am just so impressed. I'm so amazed that in all of the changes to business practices, the changes throughout the course and the twists and turns of this pandemic, how incredibly resilient and dynamic and incredible employers have been. I mean, we're seeing tremendous employment gains during a time when things are still tremendously uncertain. Quickly, and then I'll wrap up, just looking further into the future, Oregon's Office of Economic Analysis forecasts that we're going to be back at that February 2020, that pre-pandemic jobs level by the summer of 2022. So they're anticipating that we're going to continue on this rapid growth. We've added 80,000 jobs in the last 8 months. They're saying by next summer, we're going to add those other 80,000 to payrolls again. And from there, is it all good? I mean, I, for one, am a huge fan of being able to talk about our next economic expansion. There's still going to be economic headwinds that are facing us further into the future, though. First, the primary way that Oregon has grown its labor force for the past few decades is by people moving here. Workers moving here. Net in migration is what that's called. People move here from other states, other areas, and that's the biggest way that we gain labor force. That was down by 20% in 2020. Now, a lot of that's pandemic related, but it was going down for 3 or 4 years every year before that. And that speaks to other things like housing affordability or availability at all in many of our communities, metro, rural, and along the coast in particular, I think of. And the other thing is retirements. Retirements took a pause. So the number of people who retired grew by 21%, the people who said they weren't in the labor force between 2016 and 2019. It took a pause in 2020, but now we expect it to come up again. And when someone leaves the labor force, they retire, they leave a vacancy behind them, which we have a record number of vacancies right now. And it's someone who's not looking for their next opportunity. So there's still more challenges ahead of us in addition to the immediate ones. And I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's thoughts and having the conversations about those today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gail, for that in-depth and insightful overview. There's so many takeaways, but obviously staying motivated, staying diligent are keys to that. And you alluded to the fact that we know that since the beginning of the year, employers have really been struggling to hire, and there's been that narrative that you called out about those very generous federal unemployment benefits being a negative factor on the ability of employers to hire. And I just want to pose to the entire panel, do you agree that that's one of the reasons why it's been so difficult to hire? And maybe Bridget, we can start with you and you can illuminate that for us a bit.
Absolutely. I would agree that it is a sliver of the reason. This issue is much more nuanced and complex than extended UI. Like most issues facing our communities, we cannot overly simplify and try to narrow in a 1 to 2 soundbite or press the easy button on this issue. So I have a few themes that I've been noticing, either in research, articles, and other discussions. One is the care industry has been undervalued for far too long. With a lack of affordable and available childcare and adult care options, women feel the brunt of having to choose family over income. Second, there are just simply not enough people to do all of the jobs. We had a people shortage and talent shortage in February of 2020, and that's only been exacerbated, to Gail's point, with the pandemic. Third, the third bucket is a combination of mental health and significant loss that many felt over the past year and a half, as well as extraordinary burnout. Fourth, people have discovered that they have options and are choosing not to enter a job with little chance of advancement or the ability to thrive. People are valuing their time and the lives and their lives and not putting themselves on the line with little return. The American dream is a myth. So we have to reimagine the world of work in the 21st century, not based on the Industrial Revolution's 40-hour work week, give everything to one employer and hope it pays off, et cetera. And also outdated business models, hiring practices, and policies. And those are just a few ideas, but certainly there's enough nuance out there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bridget, for that. And absolutely, I think we do have to reimagine. I think that's a great word, a great descriptive of what we need to accomplish. Anyone else want to weigh in on that particular topic? Either Kevin or Andrew or Gail, if you have any additional thoughts.
Well, I would just say I agree that you know, those states who have eliminated benefits early are not showing a significant decline in their unemployment rate. So it's a much more complex question. And actually, I just looked at a JOLTS report, which is a national report that looks at jobs and you know, availability of jobs, and it said that there were 10.9 million open jobs, but only that exceeded the number of unemployed by over 2 million. So the math just doesn't bear out that you know, eliminating these benefits are going to solve the problem.
It's wonderful that I always love somebody calling out data, but in Oregon, we also have a job vacancy survey. And we have found since spring of 2021, the same thing with just the record number of job vacancies that are out there. There's about a 1-to-1 ratio between the number of people who are unemployed and the number of job vacancies that are out there. And in the JOLTS data, and to Bridget's point, there are record numbers of people quitting their jobs. And that's why I am really excited that we're talking about both recruitment and retention today. One last point as well is that there was a report out from the census yesterday talking about how the direct stimulus payments and unemployment insurance benefits prevented millions of people from falling into poverty last year. And that comes to mind not only for the importance of it, but to talk about unemployment insurance benefits as a part of the broader safety net that happened. Households experienced 3 rounds of direct federal stimulus to them, 2 sets of tax returns in most cases. Child tax credits are going out now. And for the up to 13.2% of people who are unemployed in Oregon at some, you know, at the peak of it, they also receive some unemployment insurance benefits. But there was this broader safety net of which unemployment insurance benefits is a piece and does affect household behaviors. And it affects household behaviors in that broader context of, do we have kids at home right now? Do we have 2 earners in this household? Do all of these other things create different sets of situations for us during this pandemic environment period than they did beforehand?
Thank you, Gail. And Kevin, I know you're going to weigh in, but before you weigh in, I would love to just kind of pose the question to you and to the rest of the panel as well. With all of the data points that we're hearing and all of these factors that are contributing to the challenging hiring environment, what can we look to as employers, or what can employers look to that are indicators, signs that things are improving? What would that look like from your perspective, in addition to what else you're going to share?
Yeah, thanks, Orlando. It's a good question. We get asked this all the time. If you could look in your crystal ball, please tell us that there's a bright horizon out there. And I'm forever the optimist, so I know there is at some point. The only other piece I was going to add to the prior question was the thing that we're looking closely, and I think this came up in our prep work too, was just the conversation about labor force participation rates. I know that looking at what came out of, I think, the Fed from St. Louis right now, and some of their data are not quite back up. Gail probably tracks this much better than I do. But we're not back up yet to the pre-pandemic labor force participation rates. I think we're down around 61% nationally, or 61.7%, and pre-pandemic goes up above 63. And I think, I don't want to misquote, but that might have been around 2 million people or so that were out of the labor force right now that we're not seeing. So there's another piece there around, at least locally, what we're seeing through some of our surveys around taking a step back to think about what work means for them. And Bridget had sort of hinted at that, and this work-life balance, and just taking a pause before they jump back in. To answer your question, Orlando, I think, you know, one of the things that gives, I know the 3 of us, my colleagues, Andrew, Bridget, and I, hope is we have formed a Columbia Willamette Workforce Collaborative, which is a partnership between the 3 regional workforce boards. Excuse me. One of the things we've been doing for a number of years together is being innovative and thinking differently about how we deliver workforce development services across our regional labor market. And one of the things that I think we're very excited about, and we've seen, and I think this points to the sort of bright horizon out there, is a strong interest from our business community, our community-based partners, our community colleges, to take a step back and think about what does high quality employment look like, and how can we help businesses be competitive through that sort of conversation, and job seekers. So we've kicked off and begun to establish quality jobs initiatives with the idea to promote an equitable economic recovery by rethinking our workforce development programs. We're really excited about this. The quality jobs initiatives focuses on and believes in the value of work and the shared benefits afforded to workers, businesses, and communities through good, high quality jobs. So we've seeded a group of, and some of you may be on this webinar today, of a joint across Southwest Washington and the greater Portland metro region, business leadership, community partner leadership, higher education leadership, to begin to talk about how do we solve this problem together. And we're very excited as workforce development boards to be stewards of public resources. There's a lot of good work at the federal level right now focused on this very question about how do we increase public investment in our public workforce development system, through community colleges, through us as the public workforce system to help businesses, et cetera. So I think that gives me some hope. And I'm glad that John had mentioned this earlier, that it's the #1 topic of conversation amongst our business community right now, is how do we come together and solve this problem. So if I were to look at my crystal ball, Orlando, I think that would give me the greatest hope of positive change on the horizon right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Kevin. All of us are looking for that, positive outlook and that optimism that's going to point to future success. Anyone else want to weigh in on signs that might indicate hope for our employers here? Yes, Bridget.
Yes, I'd like to weigh in. I think I'll believe that there are improvements when I see a few things. More enrollment in our higher education and apprenticeship programs. So when we start to see those numbers tick up, then I think that we'll see some indication that we're going to start to grow that talent pool again. Also, business and employers investing in solutions with the public workforce system. So really coming alongside of the local workforce boards and the broader system to develop the next steps, because we get to create our solution or our future. And I don't want to wait and for the feds or state to figure it out for us. And then last, also when we start to see supply chains start to stabilize.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bridget. Gail, were you going to weigh in as well? Yeah.
Yes, I do. I have one thing to add. One thing that, so the employment department, we wrote an entire report on the disparate impact of the pandemic recession. And one of the things that we've seen historically is significant differences in unemployment rates among different demographic groups by age and by race and ethnicity. And so that was exacerbated in the initial downturn of the pandemic recession. And I think a sign of hope that I'm going to have is seeing that those hopefully come closer together in the future as employers really need to find workers. That we're seeing, for example, a couple of months ago, the teen unemployment rate nationwide was the lowest it had been in 65 years. So employers being able to embrace and bring younger workers in like that, or people with different experience backgrounds, or just more of that flexibility that's creating more opportunities. Because I think, especially when I'm thinking about younger workers, the more experience they have now, the better leaders they're going to become in the future at all of the places that they work.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much for that, Gail. So I have one additional question for the panel, but I'd like to start with you, Andrew. We know that employers are struggling right now. What tips that can you provide that would help them, create strategies or methodologies to attract people to their company? Any creative solutions that you can share that employers can maybe begin utilizing and leveraging right away?
got the mute syndrome going on, but thanks, Orlando. Yeah, I mean, I think there are some fairly obvious things. You know, we employ about 40 people in our company, and you know, things that we've looked at, sort of very practical thing is, you know, reviewing and modernizing your job description, emphasizing, you know, the opportunities and benefits of working with your company, making sure that you're not leaving potential applicants out, either because of unnecessary or inflated qualifications or experience requirements, or even bias that's, you know, implied within your job postings. I think also, you know, embracing the available technologies that are out there. You know, there's several really, really good online tools that can really help you know, maximize the number of people you reach and widely and rapidly spread the word about available jobs. And I think really having people in your organization that can dig deeply into the customization features of some of these online tools can really, really widen the net for you. And I think ultimately allow you to reach much more potential applicants. And then finally, I think, you know, like developing and retaining your current employees. I mean, to the point about these quality jobs, giving people, you know, opportunities for advancement, opportunities for training, assuring that your workforce is reflective of the community, making sure that, you know, there's work-life balance, that wages are competitive. I mean, those are all obvious things, but they're also really, really important, I think, especially to younger workers who are concerned that their workforce looks like a society in general, that they're offered, you know, opportunities for growth and advancement. Those are super important. But one other thing I want to say is sort of hearkening back to some things that Kevin said and that Bridget talked about is, you know, for years we've recognized that, you know, the economy doesn't function at the local jurisdictional level. It really does work at a regional level, at a labor shed level. So to the extent that we can work together and do that in a substantive way, and work together with our economic development partners, work together with our education partners, make employer engagement convenient for employers and streamlined in a way that really allows them to inform what they need, but to do it in a way that's convenient for them and allows them to focus on the work at hand. And I really think that that's an enormous opportunity for our region. I mean, this year, we spent a lot of time working together on a comprehensive economic development strategy that was developed across the two state by state, you know, region. It involved a number of partners. It acknowledged, you know, the need to really focus on people who have been most impacted by the economic downturn, because that's something we didn't get right the last recession, after the last recession. You know, frankly, we had the best economy we'd ever seen in Oregon just prior to the pandemic, but we also had these massive economic and educational disparities, and we can't let that happen again. We have to prioritize services to people who have been underserved, underrepresented, and most impacted. And I see that being in the forefront of these regional strategies and these regional plans. And we've got to stick together and hold each other accountable to those ideals and those values, and also to the strategies that we've identified to work together to really bring the economy back. So, I mean, I'm really optimistic about the region's capacity to work together and the opportunities to make us sort of an example, a national example of how we can have an inclusive economy and ensure, you know, economic opportunity for everyone. So I'm psyched about that stuff and really appreciate the conversation today.
Absolutely phenomenal, Andrew. Thank you for those really, I think, substantial points on what employers can look to do. And we all understand that an inclusive economy is a thriving economy. And it also increases the candidate pool when we have opportunities to eliminate and mitigate some of those things that have maybe prevented us from reaching into other communities. So anyone else want to weigh in on tips and strategies for employers?
Weigh in. I've seen some really creative things come out of our business and employer community Absolutely want to echo Andrew's points around embracing equity and inclusion for people with disabilities, maybe those that have been either justice involved or returning citizens, our trans and non-binary community, really opening the door for people that that were not necessarily acknowledged as a talent pipeline in the past. Flexible work schedules are, I think, really important to people. Increasing benefits to include childcare and support to family, and really thinking about a person as a whole family structure. And then to piggyback on that idea, Marquee companies hosted a family-friendly hiring event at Oaks Park, with rides, snacks, and activities for kids, while parents were able to speak with hiring managers. And so engaging a whole family is absolutely possible in the hiring process.
That is really cool. And I think just to add on to both Andrew's and Bridget's excellent points, the thing that I would emphasize, and we've seen this in the research that we've done, it was a tight labor market before the pandemic, it's a tight labor market again, but layering of strategies. So there's the obvious one that people call out to say raise wages, and that's happening. Employers have raised wages across the board, even beyond inflation, which has been elevated over the past several months. In addition to that, benefits, employers will start offering perks and benefits on top of raising wages, not just for the people that are coming in, but for your existing workforce as well, with retention in mind. And then also different perks beyond, just wages or traditional benefits. And in 2018, half of employers offered paid vacation or paid holidays, which means half of employers did not offer paid vacation or paid holidays, right? Flexibility, to be able to have something like that if my child's classroom gets shut down for COVID in the next couple of weeks is going to make the difference to me, and whether or not I can be there, be present, be a part of that workforce, right? So layering of those things. Also recruitment intensity, like Andrew was talking about, working regionally, looking at across your entire labor shed and partnering side by side with the resources available there to more fully engage, with recruiters, with workforce development, also putting the help wanted sign out, all of those things together and layering. And last but not least, would say loosening those work requirements. Again, point that was already made about, do you really have to have a bachelor's degree plus exactly 7 years of experience to get this job? Or can we loosen that up a little bit? Because if it's safe to do so, and you can lower those requirements at all, you're opening up more people to be qualified for openings.
Thank you so much for that, Gail. And I'm so glad that you said engage recruiters for obvious reasons. Thank you for that. I would also include that employers, something they can do tomorrow is evaluate their interview panels. Who's included in the interview process and how diverse is that interview panel? And then also level set that interview panel and what you're looking for. What are the critical takeaways that you want as an outcome for those interviews? We've been for so long using a model that is designed to screen people out of a process. We should be thinking and rethinking that to figure out ways to screen people in, and using a good, better, best model rather than maybe a positive, negative model. And then I would also say something we're seeing quite a bit, and I think, Gail, you alluded to it earlier in some of your numbers regarding relocation, but expanding your reach and possibly considering relocating candidates into the marketplace. Sometimes you can do that with a really effective budget, so that can be an option as well. Well, I want to thank all of you phenomenal panelists, but before we go, are there any closing thoughts, any things that you'd like to share before we wrap up, before we go to Q&A?
The only thing I wanted to say is you picked a really wonderful day. Oregon Employment Department cited today, September 15th, as Back to Work Day, and released a press release last week about said event. So I think that there's lots going on around the state, and it's apropos to our current situation. So Back to Work Day. Happy Back to Work Day.
Thank you, Bridget. Okay, well, Andrew, Kevin, Gail, Bridget, you guys are absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with all of us today. And we'll transition to some questions and answers. So I'm going to turn it back over to Andrew Hone. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you, Orlando, and thank you to the panel. And just the great combination of workforce board leaders along with labor economists and recruiting firms, I think is a really nice blend to give perspective that all of us as employers need to hear. So I've just really valued the conversation thus far. And I want to encourage our audience members now to really engage in the Q&A function, make sure to drop in those queries there, and we will work through them as we go through Q&A until we run out of time or run out of questions. So I'm going to pivot now to the first one here in the chat function. I think Bruce is dialing in from Sherwood, and a great part of our region. And I think the question's apropos, and I think Andrew really teased this out around regional cooperation. But let's take the aperture out a little bit, and we're saying Portland, but really, as we've been talking about, it's a national conversation, and then it's a regional one. So here's Bruce's question to all of you. How are we comparing with peer competitive regions such as Boise, Salt Lake City, Denver, all of those communities in terms of attracting, and I would even go so further as to retaining the talent? And are there things that we aren't doing that we need to start doing as a region, as a state, to be competitive for the most important ingredient in any business, which is the talent and the human side of the equation? So there's no particular person, so I just encourage folks to dive in here and just add your 2 cents, and we'll keep working through these questions.
Well, I think as Gail mentioned, we've seen sort of a drop off in migration. And as workforce development people, our first focus is really on local workers and really making sure that they're prepared to take advantage of whatever opportunities are out there, and certainly at the career track level. But, this is a question maybe that's more appropriately answered by our economic development partners in terms of those competitor regions. But I am a little bit worried about our capacity to recruit new people to the region. I think Portland particularly has taken a hit nationally, internationally, in terms of our reputation. I think the addition of remote work creates additional challenges in that people can work wherever they feel like it. And I do think we have had challenges attracting and retaining diverse talent, especially at the managerial level and above, at the executive level. And I think that will be a challenge. It's a challenge now, but it's going to be an ongoing challenge for us, and we need to figure that out.
In terms of economic recovery, jobs recovery, I don't know about Denver. I do know off the top of my head that both Boise and Salt Lake City are further along in their recovery than Oregon. And I believe particularly Boise, and I think Salt Lake City as well, have actually now expanded beyond their pre-pandemic job levels. I think that Andrew's points are all well taken on recruitment and retention. I think the much of the reason for the differential where we are right now might be less about net immigration and more about specific policy interventions related to the pandemic. There are trade-offs that every state has made in those decisions, and there's been no unified approach in any state in the country. So I think that that's where we see a lot of the differentiation, where like Hawaii, for example, is very far behind in its recovery compared to other places. And I think that, we're in the middle of the pack for that. So in terms of jobs recovery, I can say that much. But yeah, in terms of looking forward to the future, again, I would turn to construction and the chronic underbuilding of housing supply in most areas of Oregon, and Oregon's housing affordability. And there's great research on this from the Office of Economic Analysis. Even prior to the pandemic, Oregon's rural areas, for example, were among the most unaffordable rural areas in the country. And we are seeing skyrocketing prices for housing as well. And we're seeing that, in a pandemic environment, that slowed down construction again after what was already more than a decade of us not building as much as we had people coming here.
I'd like to weigh in on that. I think Bruce's question is particularly impactful when it comes to diverse communities. because and to Andrew's point, there is a narrative regarding our state and our city that does need a response. And I think, unfortunately, what we see in many cases is that recruiters don't address the issue even when it's not asked. And it does need, you can't put your head in the sand. I think we have to be able to shape the narrative and talk about the positive attributes of the city, talk about why it's great to work here, particularly in contrast with what I refer to as Zoom towns, where people are relocating and they're creating a work environment in another town, which is obviously creating those housing challenges that Gail referred to. But I think we have to be able to shape the narrative. We have to be able to do a little bit of storytelling about the city, why it's a positive place to work, and focus on some of those positive attributes. But if we ignore the conversation, candidates are left to then come up with their own ideas of what is happening, and we are not able to alleviate or at least combat some of those narratives that have been told.
All right, well, appreciate these responses. Actually, I think it builds up into another question here to pivot to, which is dialing down a lot more into diverse applicant pools. And I see a question from Sarah Longquist, and I just have to say, people have teased this out throughout their points today about how do we attract diverse talent, but also, our colleagues here at the Alliance of Partners in Diversity published a really critical piece of work, and you can check it out on their website, around the retention analysis of staff of color. And it is there's not one data point I would pick out, but just would make sure folks use that resource, make yourselves aware, because there's one aspect of it, obviously attracting diverse talent, but then there's also the aspect of retaining diverse talent. And this is part 2 of that report, where they've been working on this analytic effort for really, half a decade now. And so I just want to say, Sarah, thank you for asking that question. I want to go back to all of you as panelists. How do we reach a more diverse applicant pool? What do we have to do as employers to connect to those individuals from diverse backgrounds? And maybe we can reverse the order here, maybe start with Kevin and go back to Orlando and Bridget and Gail and Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And I'm actually going to build on Orlando, your last comments. For us in Southwest Washington, at least, we started this, and I know my colleagues have started this conversation years ago about what can we do as workforce development boards around creating a more inclusive and equitable economic climate here in our region. And for us, we sort of landed on we have to build a community that is more inclusive and equitable, and that starts with education. So one of the things we've taken on as a workforce board, there's a fantastic partnership we created with Washington State University in Vancouver, and they have a new program, thanks to Obie Ford coming to the community, a colleague and friend, build out a program called Building a Community of Equity. And one of the things we're doing as a board, thanks to some local support, financial support, is making that program a requirement of our entire team, and eventually a requirement to be a part of our board. That's the goal. And we think that education, as that goes along, if you think about who sits on and who's a part of some of the regional power structures and boards across our region, that education becomes more pervasive, and we build up more of that education and inclusivity. That will ultimately, we think, influence our investments that we make as a community through a workforce board and other organizations, and ultimately create we hope, a more inclusive and equitable economy. So I think it's not a specific resource per se, but I think it's one path is around further education for all of us on this journey. And I just want to echo, Andrew, the work at Partners in Diversity and that Mari and team are doing. That report is, we use it all the time in a lot of our conversations in Southwest Washington, I know across the region. And so the work that PID is doing, the Say Hey community, it's phenomenal. It needs to continue. So just want to give a shout out there.
Do you want to go ahead, Orlando? All right, cool. So I would also say the Partners in Diversity report is really extraordinary and eye-opening. I think talking about culture not just the culture of the community, but cultures of each of our organizations and companies needs to be talked about and put on either display or more introspection about how do we build inclusion, how do we embrace, differences in opinion, differences in experience, differences in expertise. I would also say that by partnering with local workforce boards and the local system, we have enormous networks of public, private partnerships, but also with community-based organizations and nonprofits. And when I think of diversifying any organization or company, I think about where people are. They're in church or in faith-based organizations or in other community-based organizations. And so we've gone out of our way to build those relationships, build those bridges to say, you have people who are coming to you for specific reasons, and we want them to know what we have available and vice versa, and how can we support each other? And it builds a community. And so I'd say the more community we can build and recognize that we all win when everyone wins, that we'll be able to start to make that headway. And then I can underscore thinking about people with diverse abilities and disabilities and mental health issues. And when we think about an older population, our older population will be the population to be pulling from. And a lot of them will need accommodations and nuance in their workday. So we do need to think about our both state-funded programs as well as local nonprofits that serve those communities.
Just to add on a couple of extra strategies, when I have been the hiring manager for positions at the employment department, a couple of things. Partners in diversity cannot say wonderful enough things. We post all of our job vacancies there. And again, it's a layering. This is an intensity layering of strategies thing. We post there. We will use our social media accounts to promote our vacancies instead of just popping them on our website. And we use a tool called Canva, which is really user-friendly, to be able to create those visuals that go on there in 3 to 4 different languages. We've been doing virtual webinars where we're bringing people in and just letting them talk to people on our team. What's it like to work there? We had one, I think the first one was maybe 600 people attended and more than 150 went on to apply for jobs with us. And we're doing those with simultaneous live translation. So even if I'm speaking in English, someone's dialing into this webinar and they can hear someone saying it in real time to them in their language of preference. And so these are all layered strategies that we're using. And again, something that I think Orlando mentioned before in terms of who's in your panel and bringing perspectives that aren't just yours, because you get this kind of group think like, oh, fit in our team. It's like, well, how do they interface with other partners, other people in the day-to-day work? How does that, and start that from the beginning, and it gets that buy-in and that teamwork too, and it brings just a different perspective. So all of those things. And one last one is that once you get somebody in the door, if you stop caring about it there, how long are they going to stay? So retention matters too. And we have this tool that we have used. It is one of my favorite trainings of all time. We have multiple tools, but this one, it's created by a company in Portland. It is called Diversity Works, and I'll find the link for it. It's a few $100s, but it's a cafeteria style tool that's not like, I think some retention and cultural awareness things can seem preachy. And this one's very like, it's set up when you can be safely in a room with people again, with different stations, and you just choose 4 or 5 of the different 10 stations, and you naturally end up pairing with different people. And it's this really like building awareness kind of way about just different situations based on gender, different situations based on age, different situations based on cultural background. And it just created this tremendous awareness in a way that was really engaging in the way that each individual wants to engage with it. And I love that as an option to keep that conversation going and that awareness there once people are already on staff.
Orlando or Andrew, do you want to take us home with this?
Well, I'll dive in and just be very brief, but I think what everyone has shared are absolutely correct. Those are incredibly powerful ways to increase your diversity candidate pool. The first thing I would say for every organization that we engage with is evaluating your organizational readiness first. There's a reason why Partners in Diversity conducted such an a rich survey, it was because we were losing talent from diverse backgrounds. And so organizational readiness is one of the key tools before you embark on a diversity recruiting campaign. And regarding campaigns, I would always encourage organizations to do your research first based on the discipline that you're trying to recruit from, and find those channels that are going to produce that. Where if you're looking for an accountant, you're looking at, you know, organizations that have diverse memberships in those spaces. Increasing your recruiting budget to include places like posting at Partners in Diversity or the Urban League of Portland or the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Make sure you have budget so that you can increase that ability. And then also making sure that the first point in contact of many recruiting models is your internal recruiting team. So making sure that they have the skills and ability to identify individuals who are going to fit with the organizational mission and values, and not be so focused on some of the more traditional homogeneous types of aspects that are going to lead to the same types of recruiting outcomes. We all know that when recruiters are busy, and I'm assured that all companies have very busy recruiting departments right now, the path of least resistance is the path that recruiters will take. And that means that the most salient, obvious pathways to find talent are the ones that are going to be leveraged. Intentionality, planning, and focus and budget are going to be keys to success for making sure that you have a diverse candidate pool.
All right, Andrew, do you want to double click on any of this, or are you happy?
I appreciate all the insights, so I'm pretty happy. I can't add much more. Yeah,
As a fellow Andrew, I would agree with you. It's actually just phenomenal, of course, to hear the interplay between, you know, having, again, a recruiter and workforce boards coupled with a labor economist in your voices here. I just appreciate it, and I know we're at time now, so we're gonna have to cut our conversation short today. But I think this is not, while we are here because of the impact of the moment of employment, it is not this temporal issue we face. This is about realigning the philosophy of how business engages with its human resources ultimately, and that we're all rethinking this in a way that has been upended in what it sounds like a very good way by the pandemic and the flexibility that has been offered by the use of technologies, the adaptations that we need to make, and a deeper recognition of the prioritization of equity in all of these conversations. If all of you who are on this call today have walked away with that, I certainly have, and just appreciate the depth of talent that we have on this call today, and also hope that all of our members engage in a meaningful way, the simple steps you can take to act on what you've heard. And of course, we'll make these resources available. So I hope all of you will join me in giving a huge round of applause to this remarkably talented panel, and thoughtful one at that. So I'm sure there's a massive ovation out there for all of you, and appreciate also, Orlando, you'd be willing to moderate this very talented pool. So with that, I want to thank everyone once again, of course, to our sponsors. Thank you so much. We will make sure to update our website with the resources that were mentioned today, including, of course, the diversity talent, which is diversity retention project, which is already circulated in the chat function. And we will be back in a hybrid virtual way on September 30th. It is a critically important event for the Portland Business Alliance, known as A Place with No Ceiling, which recognizes the contributions of both individuals and small and large companies whose women have really shattered or simply refused to recognize the glass ceiling. So we'll be doing it appropriately at Providence Park, which literally has no ceiling. And of course, we'll be live casting that as well. So we hope you'll join us there. And of course, to everyone, we hope you are well, stay safe, take care of one another, and be well. Thank you.